Many years ago, I took a course in, I think it was thinking, from Charles Case. Case was a very interesting guy, very, very intrigued with thinking and how people thought and what they thought about. But he was especially intrigued with how people thought about thinking. And I think he had an anthropological background. So, assuming that he was an anthropologist, he was very interested in the anthropology of thinking. And one of the lessons that came out of this was that different cultures have very different attitudes and beliefs about thinking. What it is, how it works, how you do it, who in the culture does it, what type of person is entitled or licensed to think in a certain way, what other person is not or shouldn't, or is that is seen as a negative. And certain parts of a culture, certain subsets of a culture, people that employ a certain style of thinking are seen as virtuous or kind of being with the program, and people who employ that same style of thinking in another cultural context may be seen as out of line or somehow deviating, kind of deviance. And deviance is always a big problem. It's a problem in even in modern criminal law. What is criminality? Deviation from social norms. Well, what about the social norms? Are they deviating from something or not? So Case, when he talked about thinking, he said in his analysis of the superior thinkers, what is it, here's the idea, we should say, always ask ourselves, how do we use this in practice? That's a very pragmatic NLP question. And if we think of NLP as coming from the pragmatic tradition of how is this applied usefully in day-to-day life versus how do we make a more ornate or more Baroque theory, or how do we perpetuate a theoretical tradition, which you might find in academia. NLP, different from that. NLP questioned the validity of that and said, well, the real issue of importance is how do we apply this? How does this work in practice? What is the practical insertion of this new knowledge into, as I think John Grinder would say, into the flow of experience? And that in itself, the concept of the flow of experience, is an area of quite a bit of complexity and revision. So for now we can say, just as in a folkloric sense, the flow of experience, how can we insert into the flow of experience more effective, more powerful forms of thought that allow us to redirect and reshape the flow of experience, if you want to call it that. Almost our subjective passage through time takes on a very different quality or a different texture of one of greater fullness, I think, and greater possibility. Well, so Charles Case, anthropologist, thinker of anthropology and anthropology of thought, framed it like this. He said the superior mind had three attributes, and this was what you would find regardless of the culture you were in. A superior mind, one, had greater stamina. So stamina in the athletic sense, and he said you had to compare thought to athleticism. Superior thinking was very athletic. It had an athleticism to it. It was the same basic factors that made a superior athlete made a superior thinker. So that's a metaphor. Remember our earlier little discussion of what is a metaphor for this? Well, a really good metaphor for superior thinking is the superior athlete who has great stamina, great cardiovascular stamina. So a good athlete or a great athlete can go and maintain energy levels throughout the duration of a game or whatever is required that would be completely exhausting to most people. So the athleticism of thought does involve stamina. The second very important factor that Case raised was that a superior thinking involves flexibility. And I've noticed that there are people who had tremendous stamina. They could go on and on and on for hours and hours and hours, but they were inflexible thinkers. So the second attribute of the superior thinker is great flexibility, someone who can adopt other perceptual positions or can rethink things, someone who is not necessarily trapped in categories or trapped in theories or trapped in self-images, which are beliefs and theories about oneself, but can say, well, what if I had a different self-image? What if the world worked differently? I think in that sense, if you want to even drill it down further, The superior thinker is capable of performing a wide range of thought experiments and treats the mind as a laboratory. So here we're kind of combining metaphors, the athletic metaphor and the laboratory metaphor. Or the experimental kitchen might be one, or any place where one can freely, the playground is another good one, freely perform mental experiments in ways that other people would simply take things for granted or form assumptions, hard little rocky assumption pebbles about things. So the superior thinker is more elastic, if you want to use the yogic metaphor, has a better playground and can play more interesting games, has a better laboratory, is willing to perform more experiments, who treats his or her mind as a field of experimentation instead of simply a computer, say, that runs programs and is given a set of programs and is there to simply run those programs accurately and not lose any of the bits of the code. And the third critical aspect, and I think probably the most important aspect in cases thinking, was, okay, so we had endurance as the first one, right? We had that idea of great stamina, and we had great flexibility, and yet there might be other factors in thought. And I think that one of the ways I would put that is as playfulness, a serious kind of playfulness. I have found that kids sometimes are raised in environments where they are encouraged very much to be playful in certain contexts. They can be playful with other kids, they can be playful with the ball, but when they become playful with thought, and when they have like that very adaptive thought that's very playful, that tends to kind of, I don't know, adults seem to start to get tight and they get very weird and their necks tense up. So we're like drill down a bunch. Look at the physiology, and I think kids are experts, absolutely experts at reading physiology of adults, and either they go silent or they get scowls on their faces or they detect muscle tension and they get these very strong unconscious signals. Don't go there, don't be playful in those ways. One must take this stuff very, very seriously. So in Case's formulation, what he was talking about was coordination, and I think that's probably the most important, deep, third level thing. Yes, you must have stamina, you must have flexibility, but the thing that NLP can teach, and I think maybe teach better than other areas, is cognitive coordination, or coordination across multiple domains of mind, coordinations between the right and left hemisphere, coordinations between the frontal regions and the cerebellum in the back of the brain, coordinations between the brain stem and the mesencephalon and the limbic system, coordinations between the hippocampus, the amygdala, the orbitofrontal cortex, which are areas that Elkon and Goldberg goes into quite at length. So coordination is very important. A superior thinker has tremendous coordination, just like a superior athlete has tremendous coordination. A superior thinker has tremendous elasticity, like the very elastic athlete who can move in all kinds of directions. And a superior thinker has superior stamina, tremendous sort of the cardiovascular feature of the brain is very strong. When you put those together, you get the superior mind of the superior athlete. And of course, you have to have a wonderful sense of the game. There are people that have like a lot of what you might call sort of fundamentals are in place, but that little X factor that comes in there that distinguishes the kind of play when you see it and your mirror neurons are completely engaged and you're just kind of feeling it kind of rippling through your bloodstream and your nerves, when you're mesmerized by the performance you've just witnessed, that X factor definitely comes from that combination of very deep confidence that one has mastered, that it has the stamina, they know they've got the flexibility, they fully are living in the joy and the pleasure and the strength of those coordinations, and then that X factor of play comes in, where it becomes a very high form of play. So that's going to be your take-home lesson for today: stamina, flexibility, coordination, and playfulness. All right? So practice that.